Now that we've introduced getters and setters, we can actually divide our attributes up into mutable and immutable attributes. We've actually seen examples of this before with the Python turtle. The Python turtle has all sorts of attributes, such as, say, the color attribute that gives me its current color. This is an example of a mutable attribute. I can change it. I can use it in an assignment statement. I can assign it to, say, blue. That changes the turtle in the window. And in fact, if I look at the attribute is changed. Now it has other attributes such as, say, the X position. That tells me the X coordinate of my turtle. This is an example of an immutable attribute. I cannot change it. If I try to use it in an assignment statement, I'm going to get an error. And the error tells me that I cannot set that attribute. All right, so we understand what it means to be a mutable or an immutable attribute. How do we actually create this distinction in our class definition? Well, if we're doing everything through getters and setters, it's really quite simple. If it's mutable, it has a setter. And if it's not, it does not. Let's go look at an example. So here I have this module person, and inside of person, I have this person class. And the attributes that I have are things like, say, name, and the year in which the person is born. And of course, I have these hidden attributes that begin with the underscore, such as underscore name or underscore born, but the user is not going to access them. They're only going to go through the getters and setters. Let's go create a person. So I'm going to import person. I'm going to create myself as a person. Let's give it a year. All right. So name is a mutable attribute. I can use the getter in order to access it, and I can use the setter in order to change its value if that's what I want to do. All right, so we go look at it again. All right, and if I were to convert this to a string, this is what this looks like. Now the year that I'm born, that is an immutable attribute. I can use the getter in order to access it, but if I try to set it, I can't do that because there is no attribute set born. It's really that simple. Now, of course, if I don't have a setter for the born, you might ask, okay, well, but how did I set the year that I was born in the first place? Well, that's because it was included in the initializer. If you notice, the initializer is not just the name, it's also the year in which I was born. And that's okay. When we say immutable, we don't mean that you can't ever set it. We mean that once the object is created, you can't change it. So the only way that you can set it is at the very beginning in the constructor call. Now, because of this distinction between the mutable and the immutable attribute, we actually have some interesting things going on here in the definition of my initializer. In fact, right away, we'll notice that I'm actually using the setter inside of the initializer. Now, why am I doing that? Well, if I look at the assert statements, you'll notice that I am not enforcing the precondition for name anywhere. And that's because I don't have to. If I call the setter is going to handle the preconditions for me. So that's perfectly fine. On the other hand, born does not have a setter. So that means it is now my responsibility inside of the initializer to enforce the preconditions. And because it has no setter, I'm going to have to assign it to the hidden attribute underscore born myself directly. Now, remember, we all talk about how it's not okay to access hidden variables, but I am the definer, and I'm doing this inside of the class definition. Hidden just means that it is bad for the user in order to access this. Okay, so now we fully understand getters and setters, and we can completely control access to our class. Except for, well, sort of, because what's going on with all these other classes that we've seen before? Things like, say, turtle, right? Turtle doesn't have getters and setters. I just sort of change the values directly, and if I give it something that violates the invariant, well, it actually protects what's going on here. Well, turtle does have getters and setters. They're just hidden. And what I've done here is data encapsulation. Now, how did I hide them? Well, that's a really interesting question, and that is an advanced programming topic, and we will cover that in another video series.